The candy store Sweet Surrender wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find a young tech billionaire. It was cramped, overflowing with the cloying scent of sugar butter and vanilla lined with giant glass jars filled with gummy candies of every hue, rainbow swirl lollipops, and handcrafted chocolate bars wrapped in gleaming foil. For Ethan Stone, it felt like a trip back to a childhood he barely had swallowed by board meetings and billion-dollar deals from a remarkably young age. He hated it. The smell of sugar made his head ache. The noise of the kids and adults pretending to be kids made him want to flee. He was only there because his retired former secretary had pleaded with him to pick up some specific treats for her granddaughter's birthday party, a simple errand. Yet it felt like wading through quicksand. Ethan, in his impeccable Savile Row suit, looked as out of place as a shark in a goldfish bowl. He was scrolling through the list his secretary had emailed, trying to distinguish between gummy bears and jelly babies. Utter nonsense. He frowned, his finger moving rapidly across the screen. And then there was a collision. It wasn't a gentle bump, it was a candy catastrophe. A small woman, apparently trying to photograph a giant pink marshmallow mountain, with her phone stepped back abruptly without looking. She slammed right into him, and in that instant, the paper bag full of tiny coated candies she was holding burst open. A shower of colorful chocolate candies, M&M's, Skittles, Reese's Pieces, rained down onto the polished wooden floor. A few bounced up, hitting Ethan's expensive suit. One even landed neatly on his head, looking like a ridiculous tiny hat. "Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry." The voice was flustered and genuinely apologetic. Ethan looked up from the mess at his feet. The woman. Emily Carter stood there, face bright red, her loosely pinned brown hair now escaping in wisps, her large hazel eyes wide with horror. She wore a simple floral dress, looking gentle and perhaps a little clumsy. Ethan, by instinct, was about to unleash a torrent of cold, curt remarks about carelessness and dry cleaning bills. But when he saw her face, why? Not the usual defensive anger or blank indifference he encountered, but genuine remorse bordering on tears. He stopped, and the candy on his head probably contributed to his momentary confusion. He sighed, the sound devoid of irritation. It's all right, just a lot of candy." Emily immediately bent down to help pick up. "Let me help you. I'm so clumsy. I was trying to get a picture of that marshmallow mountain for my sister. She loves pink." Ethan also crouched down, feeling utterly absurd as he fumbled with tiny candies with fingers more accustomed to keyboards and touchscreens. "Don't bother. Leave it. I'll just get new ones." No, it was my fault," Emily insisted. She was much quicker than him, scooping candies into the remains of her torn bag. Her hand brushed against his, unintentionally making them both flinch slightly. In that moment, amidst the sweet scent of candy and the bright lights, Ethan felt something profoundly odd. This woman was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was so disarmingly real, almost naive. "All right." Ethan stood up, brushing off his suit. "I think you got most of it." Emily stood up, clutching the sagging candy bag. "Yes, I'm really sorry for the trouble." Ethan looked at her for another moment, a small smile touching the corner of his lips. "It's fine. At least it was a sweet collision." Emily blushed, a small smile also appearing on her lips. "Have a good day, you too." "Miss Candy Collision," Ethan replied. They went their separate ways. Ethan shook his head, wondering what the hell had just happened. Emily Carter. The name sounded so ordinary, but she wasn't. He completely forgot about buying the candy for his secretary's granddaughter and walked out of the store, his mind still replaying the image of the flustered, clumsy woman with the earnest smile. Weeks later, Las Vegas. Unlike the sweet, unassuming candy store, Vegas was Ethan's world. The blinding neon lights, the throbbing music from nightclubs, the clinking of slot machines, the mingled scents of cigarette smoke and expensive perfume creating an intoxicating, overwhelming atmosphere. He was here for a major tech conference, a place teeming with rivals, opportunists, and tense negotiations conducted behind closed doors. Saturday night was the gala event. Ethan hated these galas. He hated having to paste on fake social smiles, hated listening to empty flattery. He stood by the bar, whiskey in hand, his eyes scanning the crowd, and then he saw her, Emily Carter. She was standing near the hors d'oeuvres table chatting with a group of other women who looked like they were on a trip or celebrating something. She wore a simple navy cocktail dress, still looking gentle and slightly out of place amidst the Vegas glitz, but she looked radiant. She was laughing, and her laugh was so genuine, so unlike the strained smiles around her. Ethan felt a strange impulse. He walked towards her, not entirely sure what he intended to say. "Miss Candy Collision," he said as he approached Emily. Startled, turning around, her hazel eyes widened in surprise. Then recognition dawned. A smile lit up her face. "Oh, you're the man from the candy store," she said, a little breathless. "That's right. Small world, isn't it? Vegas is the last place I expected to find you. I'm here with friends." "We're celebrating a little," Emily explained, gesturing towards her group. "And you're here for work, aren't you? You look like you belong here." "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult," Ethan said with a light laugh. "Yes, work." They exchanged a few pleasantries, nothing too deep, just a shared sense of surprise at this second meeting. Ethan found himself surprisingly comfortable talking to her. She didn't demand anything, didn't try to impress him, she was just herself. As the night wore on, the music got louder, the drinks flowed more freely. Ethan got pulled into an unavoidable business conversation, while Emily and her friends migrated towards the dance floor. He glanced over, occasionally seeing her laughing and dancing awkwardly but joyfully. Then a strange man, looking perhaps a little too smooth, approached Emily and her friends with a tray of champagne flutes, compliments of the conference organizers, "Ladies, to celebrate your evening." Emily and her friends thanked him profusely. They took the glasses, laughing and chatting happily. Ethan didn't pay close attention to this. He was busy dodging a pointed question from a competitor he didn't see. The strange man glanced towards Ethan's table, a smirk playing on his lips before disappearing back into the crowd. He didn't see Emily suddenly clutch her head, feeling unusually dizzy. She frowned. The champagne tasted odd. One of her friends also slumped against the table. Over the next few minutes, the floor seemed to spin for Emily. The music became distorted, the lights blurred into long streaks. She felt nauseous, weak. I don't feel well," she mumbled to her friend next to her. That friend was also leaning against the chair, eyes closed. Me neither." Then Emily felt a hand on her arm. "Are you okay?" The voice, it was familiar. She tried to focus. It was Ethan. His face looked concerned. She looked into his eyes, but they seemed to multiply, triple. I'm so dizzy. Something's wrong." "Maybe you've had too much to drink," Ethan said, his own voice sounding slightly off, heavier. He also felt his head spinning a little, but he blamed it on the last whiskey. "No, it's not that." Emily tried to stand, but her legs were shaky. Ethan held on to her. She leaned against him, weak. Her light floral scent reached him. The warmth of her body radiated through her dress. He felt an inexplicable pull. "I'll take you back to your room," he said, his voice a little hoarse. Emily nodded weakly, too disoriented to protest. "Yes, please." Emily's memory after that was a blur. Long, empty corridors, an elevator ride up a door. Opening, she only remembered the feeling of being supported, the soft feeling of a luxurious bed beneath her back, and Ethan's face looking down at her, somehow both a stranger and familiar. Ethan wasn't much better. His mind was hazy. His memory of the rest of the night was like a corrupted old movie, just disjointed fragments. Dim lights, whispered words that made no sense, a feeling of disorientation, and an overwhelming, inexplicable attraction. When the cruel morning light filtered through the gap in the luxury suite's curtains, Emily Carter woke up with a jolt. Her head was pounding. Her mouth was dry. It felt worse than any hangover she'd ever experienced. She slowly opened her eyes. Everything around her was unfamiliar. The high ceiling, the crystal chandelier, the opulent furnishings. This wasn't her friend's room. She turned her head and instantly froze, lying beside her in the bed. Fast asleep was Ethan Stone, the billionaire from the candy store and the gala. She let out a small gasp, shooting up in bed as if electrocuted, the silk comforter falling away. She quickly pulled it back to her chest, her eyes wide with horror. Ethan jolted awake at the sound. He winced, clutching his head. "What?" He opened his eyes, saw her, her face a mask of terror. He looked around the room, down at himself, thankfully still dressed in his pants, then back at her. Silence descended on the room, broken only by Emily's frantic heartbeat and Ethan's ragged breathing. They were together in this room, in this bed, and neither of them had any clear memory of how they got here or what had happened. The shock and disbelief were palpable on both their faces. The fateful candy collision at Sweet Surrender had led to a perplexing, fateful night in Las Vegas, a night neither of them had planned for and one they utterly failed to understand. They didn't know that the night wasn't a random accident. It was the result of a carefully orchestrated scheme targeting Ethan Stone and Emily. Carter was just an unfortunate pawn caught in the crossfire, and they certainly didn't know that the consequences of this mysterious, fateful night would change their lives forever in ways neither of them could have possibly imagined. Their story, which began with sweet candy and ended in a Vegas haze, had just begun. The morning after the Las Vegas night was a waking nightmare. Shock, shame, and 1,000 unspoken questions hung in the air like stale smoke. Ethan Stone, a man who had never lost control in his life, felt his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. Emily Carter, who had always lived a quiet, orderly existence, found everything turned upside down to an unbelievable degree. Their first conversation was awkward, filled with long silences and clumsy apologies. Neither of them remembered the specifics, only a hazy sensation of a wild night, an invisible force that had pushed them together in a moment of utter abandon. They agreed to keep in touch, an empty promise made him panic just to escape that hotel room as quickly as possible. Weeks later, just as life seemed to be settling back into its routine, a second shock hit, forceful and undeniable. Emily discovered she was pregnant. The positive pregnancy test lay on Emily's small kitchen counter, looking utterly out of place and changing everything. Her hands trembled as she called Ethan. His voice, usually calm and decisive, wavered. For the first time she'd ever heard it, pregnant Ethan almost whispered over the phone, "Are you sure I took 2 tests?" Emily's voice was thick with unshed tears. They began to roll down her cheeks. She knew this would ruin his life, the life he had worked so hard to build. Silence, a silence that stretched into an eternity. Ethan was processing the information. A child. The result of a night he didn't remember with a woman he had simply bumped into in a candy store. His career, his reputation, all his future plans, everything was at stake. "I'll be there," he finally said, his voice regaining some control, though still tight. "We need to talk." That conversation led to a decision neither of them wanted, but felt powerless to avoid. Under pressure from Ethan's family, who wanted to avoid a costly scandal, and the sense of responsibility Ethan himself felt towards the coming child, they reached an agreement, a contract, marriage. It would be a marriage on paper designed to give the child a name and stability. They would live together at least until things settled down. There was no mention of love, no expectation of romance, just a contract, cold and practical. Ethan arranged everything swiftly with ruthless efficiency. A small private wedding kept far from the media. Emily moved into his large, minimalist penthouse, bringing with her only a few small boxes of personal belongings and a feeling of immense displacement. Their married life began in awkwardness and distance. They ate dinner together in silence, sharing the vast living space, yet feeling like they were in 2 different worlds. Emily tried not to intrude, spending time in her makeshift study, drawing and reading. Ethan buried himself in work, spending the late hours of the night in his private office. But living together, even just on paper, began to chip away at the walls. Emily, with her gentle nature, quiet thoughtfulness, and touch of endearing clumsiness, gradually seeped into Ethan's ordered life. She left small notes on the kitchen counter, sometimes cooked simple meals, or simply sat with him in the living room, reading while he worked. Ethan, who initially saw her only as an obligation, began to notice her presence. He realized she had a quiet sense of humor, a surprising depth of perspective on the world that he had never paid attention to. He started looking for her presence in the silent house. The initial distance was slowly replaced by curiosity, then respect, and eventually a quiet, unnamed affection. Emily felt it too. After the initial fear and hurt, she found Ethan wasn't as cold as he appeared. He was considerate of her comfort during the pregnancy, always ensuring she had everything she needed. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she'd catch his gaze on her growing belly with a strange, thoughtful expression. She began to see the man beneath the successful billionaire's facade, a lonely man, burdened by pressure with a heart softer than he allowed himself to show. A quiet affection blossomed between them like a seed buried under ice waiting for the right time to sprout. They began to share more, laugh more, and rare moments of genuine connection emerged, blurring the lines of their contract marriage. However, this fragile happiness quickly faced major challenges. Ethan's ex, Sophia, a successful model and businesswoman, reappeared. She still had feelings for Ethan and saw his sudden marriage as a temporary mistake. Sophia was charming, shrewd, and manipulative, constantly seeking ways to interfere between Ethan and Emily, sowing seeds of doubt and misunderstanding. Emily, still insecure and sensitive about her situation, was easily affected by Sophia's veiled comments and actions. She wondered if Ethan truly wanted her, or if he was just doing his duty. as if external pressure wasn't enough. Ethan was facing a far darker secret. He began experiencing strange symptoms, severe headaches, momentary memory loss, slight tremors. After numerous tests, the diagnosis was like a death sentence, a rare hereditary neurodegenerative disease, the same one that had claimed his grandfather's life. The illness was incurable and likely hereditary. This news was a crushing blow to Ethan. He lived in fear not only for himself, but for his unborn child. He didn't want to pass on this disease, and he certainly didn't want Emily to bear the burden of caring for a sick man. The illness and the fear began to change Ethan. He became irritable, distant. He deliberately tried to push Emily away, believing it was the only way to protect her and the baby from the grim future that awaited him. He intentionally created distance, said hurtful things, did things to make Emily miserable. Hoping she would leave, Emily couldn't understand his sudden change. She thought the fragile feelings between them had been an illusion, that he didn't truly care for her and was simply trying to escape the marriage, perhaps because of Sophia, perhaps because he regretted it. Her heart was broken. The misunderstandings piled up, coupled with Sophia's persistent interference and Ethan's inexplicable behavior, which she didn't know was due to his illness, created an irreparable rift. Emily, heartbroken and her belief in Ethan's affection shattered, decided she couldn't continue living in this marriage of pretense and pain. She confronted Ethan, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this anymore. Ethan, I think we should get a divorce." Ethan looked at her, his face expressionless, like a stone hiding the storm raging within him. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? She would leave, and he wouldn't be a burden to her. But seeing the pain in her eyes, hearing those words felt like his heart was being crushed. He nodded, the harsh agreement escaping his lips. "If that's what you want. No explanation, no justification." Ethan let her go, believing he was doing the best thing for her and the baby, whom he would try to protect from afar. Emily, carrying a broken heart and shattered dreams, left the penthouse, left Ethan Stone's life. She moved to New York, a vibrant city, determined to rebuild her life and pursue her passion for art. 3 years passed. 3 years is a long time, long enough for wounds to heal, long enough for a strange city to become home, long enough for a once shy woman to become strong and independent. Emily Carter now was no longer the clumsy girl from the candy store or the awkward contract wife in the luxurious penthouse. She had found her voice through paint and color. Her work, initially small pieces sold at street fairs, gradually gained notice. Now Emily Carter was a recognized artist with her pieces displayed in prestigious galleries. Her first solo exhibition at a renowned Manhattan gallery was a resounding success. Crowds gathered around her paintings, works filled with raw emotion, combining gentle strokes with a deep sadness and an underlying resilience. Amidst the buzz of the opening night, Emily was smiling and talking to guests, feeling a sense of accomplishment she'd never known. Then her gaze swept across the gallery entrance and froze. Standing there in the doorway was Ethan Stone. He looked the same, impeccably dressed, tall, but something was different. His eyes no longer held the cold arrogance of the past. Instead, they held a depth and a weariness that time had etched onto him. He didn't step in immediately, just stood there staring at her through the crowd of people. Emily's heart clenched. 3 years. 3 years she had tried to forget him, to bury the memories of their brief marriage, of that fateful night, of the feeling of loving and being hurt. But just seeing him standing there, all those emotions rushed back like a tidal wave. Ethan finally stepped in slowly, his eyes never leaving her. He walked among her paintings, the work she had poured her soul into during the years of separation. He stopped before an abstract piece titled Sweet Collision, with chaotic yet harmonious swaths of color reminiscent of a clumsy yet fateful moment. He said nothing, only looked at the painting, then looked at her. In his eyes, Emily no longer saw the regret or distance of the divorce day. Instead, she saw recognition, admiration, and something much deeper. It was longing. It was care. It was the affection that was still there, burning low beneath the ashes of time and misunderstanding. They stood a few feet apart in a room filled with art and strangers. The world around them seemed to disappear. There were only the two of them, people who had once been married by a contract, now meeting again as familiar strangers, carrying the weight of the past and the confusion of the present. This reunion, after 3 years, was more than just a meeting. It was the opening act of a new chapter, fraught with complex emotions. unrevealed secrets, and the big question of whether fate would grant them a second chance. Ethan still loved Emily, still cared for her, even though his illness remained a burden and the misunderstandings lingered, and Emily, though stronger still, carried the scars and unanswered questions about the man who had once been her whole world, even if only for a short time. The exhibition opening continued to buzz around them, but for Ethan and Emily, time seemed to stand still. The unexpected encounter after 3 years of separation had churned up every buried emotion. Ethan stepped closer, stopping in front of her, his gaze still fixed on Emily. "You look different," he said, his voice hoarse, not like the sharp tone of the Ethan Stone she used to know. "You did it. Emily, I'm really proud of you." His sincere compliment surprised Emily. She had been prepared for coldness or worse indifference, but what she saw in his eyes was genuine admiration. "Thank you, Ethan," she replied, her voice slightly trembling. What are you doing here?" I just happened to be passing by," he lied awkwardly. Something Ethan Stone rarely did. "I saw your name and I had to come in." He paused, seemingly wrestling with himself. Are you doing well?" "Yes, I'm doing well," Emily answered, her smile strained. How could she be truly well when her heart still carried such scars? "And you? Are you still busy?" "Yes," Ethan nodded. Busyness seemed to be his only safe refuge. The conversation fell back into silence. There was too much left unsaid, too many questions unanswered. Emily looked at him, trying to read what was going on in this man's mind. Why had he changed so abruptly 3 years ago? Why had he let her go so easily? Ethan looked back at her, his eyes holding a deep sadness that Emily couldn't begin to understand. He wanted to tell her everything to explain the reasons behind his cruelty, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't want that truth to tarnish her current success and happiness. After a few tense minutes, Ethan took a deep breath. I think I should go. Congratulations again, Emily. The exhibition is wonderful." He turned ready to leave, and once again Emily felt her heart clench just as it had 3 years ago. She couldn't let him walk away again without answers. "Ethan, wait," she called out. He stopped, turning his head. Why did you do it? Why did you let me go?" Ethan looked at her, a flicker of pain crossing his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the truth was revealed in another way, not from Ethan himself. A few days after the exhibition, Emily received an unexpected call from Ethan's retired former secretary, Mrs. Miller, who had always been fond of Emily. She had heard whispers of their reunion and felt a deep conviction about her silence over the years. "Miss Carter." "It's Mrs. Miller." The elderly woman's voice sounded anxious. "I need to talk to you about Ethan. There are things you need to know." Emily went to meet Mrs. Miller, filled with doubt and a fragile hope. Mrs. Miller, with tears in her eyes, told her the whole truth about the terrible hereditary illness, about Ethan's discovery of it shortly after Emily became pregnant, about his fear of passing it on to their child, about his agonizing decision to push her away, to protect her and the baby from a bleak future. She spoke of how much Ethan had suffered after she left, of how he had always quietly followed and cared about her life, of how happy he had been to see her succeed. Each word from Mrs. Miller felt like a knife twisting in Emily's heart, but at the same time it untangled the knots. Clearing away all the misunderstandings and resentment that had accumulated, Emily wept uncontrollably. Not from feeling abandoned, but from the profound pain Ethan had carried alone from his silent sacrifice. He hadn't stopped loving her. He loved her so much that he would rather hurt her than let her suffer with him. Immediately, Emily went to see Ethan. She found him in his study, looking tired and defeated. "Ethan," she called his name. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Emily, why are you here?" "I know," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I know about your illness." Ethan's face went pale. Who told you?" "It doesn't matter who told me." Emily stepped closer to him, tears welling up again. "What matters is, why didn't you tell me? Why did you do that?" Ethan lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. I didn't want you to suffer. This disease, it killed my grandfather. I didn't want you to have to care for a sick man, didn't want our child to face the risk of inheriting it." Emily knelt before him, taking his hands. They were cold. "Ethan, you fool. Did you think pushing me away was protecting me? Didn't you realize the worst thing wasn't the illness, but losing you, thinking that you didn't love me?" She looked directly into his eyes, her gaze full of love and understanding. I love you, Ethan. Love. I've always loved you. Whether you're sick or not, whatever the future holds, I want to be with you. The sincerity in Emily's words broke down the last wall in Ethan's heart. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder, weeping like a child. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be weak, allowed himself to be loved and accepted. After that night, everything changed. The truth was revealed. The misunderstandings were cleared away. Their love, suppressed by circumstances and misguided sacrifice, now burned brighter than ever. Emily didn't leave Ethan. She stayed by his side, learning about the illness, with him, facing the challenges together. Ethan learned to lean on her to accept her love and support. They decided to start over. This time it wasn't a contract, but a genuine vow of love. They had a small, intimate wedding with only close family and friends, filled with laughter and happy tears. Emily wore a simple wedding dress she designed herself, and Ethan looked at her with eyes full of love. Not long after their second wedding, they welcomed their second child, a healthy and beautiful baby girl. Emily's first child, now a spirited little boy, had a loving father and a complete family. Their life wasn't without its challenges. Ethan's illness remained a burden with its ups and downs, but they didn't face it alone. They had each other. Emily was Ethan's rock, his greatest source of encouragement. Ethan gave Emily security and unconditional love. Together, they built a family filled with love, laughter, and understanding. Ethan continued his work, but dedicated more time to his family. Emily continued her painting career, creating works full of hope and love. Watching their children play in the small, charming garden of their new home, Ethan held Emily's hand tightly. His hand still trembled slightly sometimes, but his heart was at peace and full. I love you, he said, looking towards the horizon. I love you too. Emily rested her head on his shoulder. More than anything, they had come a long way, from a clumsy collision in a candy store to a fateful night in Vegas. A contract, marriage full of misunderstandings, a painful separation, and finally, a reunion based on truth, love, and sacrifice. Fate might have been tangled from the start, but in the end, it led them back to each other, building a new contract. One of eternal love, stronger than any paper agreement. Ethan and Emily, two seemingly unrelated people, found their paradise right in each other's arms, proving that true love can overcome any illness, any misunderstanding, and any challenge life throws their way. They lived happily, not because there were no difficulties, but because they faced them together. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying the content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more updates. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. Let's spread the word together. Thanks for the support.